Band Talk with Timothy Heyer. Can you turn down the music, please? Thank you. So, in this episode, we are going to talk about bikes. So, Tim, you got a new bike recently.
I did.
What bike did you get?
I got a 2022 Specialized Stump-jumper Evo Alloy frame.
What made you get that bike? What were some things that really made you say, yep, that's the bike?
For me, it came down to versatility and the ability to customize and change the geometry settings. I liked that it was alloy, and the cherry on top was that it has the little in-frame storage so you can pack snacks and extra things, streamline the process a little bit, and it also is able to carry a water bottle, unlike my old bike. So not needed, but definitely a bonus. Keeps a little bit extra weight.
Can you tell the viewers what bike you had previously to this bike?
So prior to this, I had a 2015 Focus SAM frame that I built up, and that was alloy as well, 27.5, and it was a really fun bike, but definitely due for an update. I felt like it felt a bit small, especially going downhill, like down more technical stuff. So changing to something with a little bit newer geometry that's feels a little bit roomier but not, too large is a really nice feeling. I appreciate the added stability without feeling like I lose any of the maneuverability, at least so far, going from that bike to what I have now. So,
is there any downfalls you see about the new bike, the Stump-jumper?
As of right now, I don't see any, but we're only, I think, 5 rides in on it, so it hasn't had a whole lot of time. It still has a little bit of that new bike feeling.
Yes.
So pretty happy with it overall. I think this trip will be a really good testing ground on what I like. The jury's still out on the full 29er wheel set, but as of right now, I'm kind of liking it. It hasn't been too much of an issue. So if it is, I like having the ability to at least mullet it, to have a little bit more room on the back. But as of now, especially for the stuff that we have ridden, getting that little extra traction in the back wheel for climbing has been pretty nice. So can't find too many faults. If I had to pick one, it's definitely a little heavier than my old bike, but bigger wheels with dual gravity casing tires, so like front and rear gravity tires, and bigger wheel sizes is definitely going to add some weight. So I can't say it hasn't been much to get used to, but you definitely feel it a little bit when you're just starting pedaling. Once you get the momentum going, it's not that noticeable. Which brings me to a bonus, I would say, is especially going down, I just feel like it's easy speed to pick up with the bigger wheels. Just kind of almost effortless to get going at a moderate pace. So looking forward to really getting to know her and seeing what it's really capable of.
Nice. So if you were to suggest someone getting into bikes, how do you afford new bikes, and what's that look like, and how's that work for you?
If they're just getting into it, first I'd say if you can, find a friend who might let you borrow their bike first. Make sure you like it, make sure it's something you can see yourself doing, because it is a little bit of an investment. And if you know you like it, you can set up a little bit of a plan to set money aside to save up for what you'd like. I would definitely say at first start with something a little bit more on the lower end of the build quality, because you can always upgrade parts So get a complete bike and then find out what you like and don't like, and then upgrade things as you improve and get better. What you should get totally depends on where you're riding, what type of riding that you like to do. Are you doing it just for fitness, or do you want to do it for more of like, I don't know, the adrenaline side of things, where you would like hit jumps and drops and go fast? That's all complete personal preference, and I think up to every individual to try to figure out. And, you know, preferences definitely change over time, so nothing is ever set in stone. I would say to try to give yourself a little bit of time, and definitely don't jump into it blind. Try to do a little bit of research. If you have a local bike shop, maybe stop in and see what they carry. Try to maybe get a bike brand that the bike shop carries, especially if you feel like they offer good service, because you'll have a little extra help when it comes to sourcing parts, fixing things that break, because, you know, breaking things is definitely inevitable when you're riding through rocks and roots and all different kinds of things. So it definitely helps to have an extra hand to help out as you're learning things. So, you know, try to find out what's available in your area and maybe take a look at that. Sometimes those shops do offer like potential financing, depending on what you're looking for. So, you know, I'd recommend saving for it, but you could always potentially look into that depending on your own preferences. So, you know, some options. Maybe try to find a good used bike, though I do think it's a little harder to find a good used bike than it seems, especially now with the market being pretty in the seller's favor. You're taking a little bit of a risk with some used parts, especially if it's somebody who, you know, doesn't really have a background in mechanic work. You can't really verify service history or anything. Some people do keep the receipts, which is good, but a lot of people probably don't. So you're just kind of taking them for their word. So if you don't know what you're looking for, it can be a little bit of a gamble at going the used route, especially for the price people are paying right now. But I'd say maybe look around. It doesn't hurt, but definitely do due diligence. Make sure you get to see the bike, ask a lot of questions, really go through everything, and, you know, try to be as thorough as you can if you go that route.
Is there like options, you know, like with cars where you can bring it to like your mechanic and have them look over it? Like, do people do that with bikes?
With used bikes, I'm sure you could, but if you're not in the same location, that could be pretty difficult. So it's usually a gamble because it's no returns.
Or you could like bring a friend that is into biking and knows kind of, if you're not confident in your abilities to assess a bike, I would definitely suggest maybe bringing a friend that is pretty comfortable. If you have a friend that's a mechanic, maybe bringing them along, just to make sure the build is, you know, not gonna,
or at least suitable, you know, like.
All right, let's talk about basic things. So, tire size. What's the sizes for tires?
So there are two main tire sizes. 29, which are like probably the most popular at this point in time. It seems to be the way the industry is going for most riding. There's 27.5, which is a slightly smaller wheel size, and it's getting less common, but still prevalent, especially for smaller riders or riders who want a more playful, easy to ride feel out of the bike. Like if you do a lot of jumps or just like quicker turning, 27.5 can be a nice option. You get a little more clearance in the rear wheel. And then even more rare these days, and I don't know if there's any current bike available off the floor in it, but would be 26-inch wheels, which is the smallest common wheel size, but that's pretty much at this point phased out.
Come on. Hey,
so
get over here.
27.5 and 29 would be the most common options, and especially if we go back to looking at buying a bike, I would buy a bike with one of those two wheel sizes, because you'll be able to get tires easier, you'll be able to get replacement wheels easier if you break a wheel or a rim. So that's definitely something to note.
Alright, so you told us the benefits of a 27, but did you tell us the benefits of a 30? 29, sorry.
So for me, at least right now, the benefits of the 29 are definitely in rolling momentum. Like, it's really easy to pick up speed and kind of stay on top of obstacles like rocks and roots, so you don't get hung up as much, which some people like, especially if you race, because it's easier to maintain your speed. Some people don't necessarily like that feel because they feel like it kind of cheats the riding experience. My personal experience, especially coming from some back and wrist injuries, I actually have really been enjoying having a slightly easier time gaining speed. And then the other benefit that I would say is traction. You definitely get great traction, especially while climbing, which, while depending on the bike that you have, it may seem like slightly more work to get started when you're climbing. Once you're going up, it really grips to rocks and roots a lot better, so there's less slipping on the rear wheel, and it just seems a little easier to get up things overall.
Any downfalls to the 29er?
Line choice is different, so like going into and out of corners is definitely something that takes a little bit of getting used to. I've been really happy with the Stump-jumper Evo because I feel like it still turns really quick, especially how big it is compared to my old bike. But it's still not the same. Like, you can't just cut really quick inside. You have to plan for it a little bit more and be ready to start the turn a little earlier. So there are some little riding differences that still take, a little bit to get used to. I'm lucky where it hasn't been a drastic transition, but it's something that is definitely noticeable when you first get on it and start to ride. The way you approach the trail and ride the trail is a little different in your line choice. So part of that is because you also get a little more confidence from being able to roll over stuff easier. So you're going a little bit more in straight lines, you're going a little faster into stuff than you might be used to before. So it's a little bit of a change there. That's something that, say, takes a couple rides to really get used to, and something you should plan for. Don't ride it once and just be like, I don't know, I don't think this is for me. Give it a few solid rides, or one really good versatile ride to make sure you're getting good time on it. Because for me, it came pretty quick, but it still kind of took a couple rides to really get to know the handling characteristics and the feel of the bike.
What about butt buzz? What is butt buzz?
So butt buzz, or tire buzz, is when you're going down or over an object and the rear tire comes up and buzzes your butt. So if you're looking at, sometimes you'll watch a DH race and they'll have the camera view from behind and you see those tire marks on their butt. That is from the rear tire. And with a 29er, because it's a taller, kind of bigger tire, if you're hanging over the back of the bike, or sometimes your timing isn't right on a feature, or you land too hard and you're not centered in the bike, that bigger tire has less clearance between, your legs and your butt. But that's also dependent on how tall you are. I am on the slightly shorter side at 5'8" with a 30-inch inseam, and for me, that's definitely in the danger zone for things. So far, at least with the Stump-jumper Evo, because I feel pretty centered in the bike, it hasn't been that much of an issue. The only time it has happened to me so far has been my errors, like either landing into something and not getting my speed right, or kind of being off center and kind of like landing back seat a little bit. So it's been more rider error that I've gotten it, but I think this trip will be a good opportunity to test it in a wider variety of places. So if it's steeper, I'll really be able to get a good feel on it and decide whether that full 29er is for me or not. As of right now, I've been really liking it, so I don't know if I'm going to change, but at some point maybe I'll test that mullet setup too and
What's
do some
mullet?
back-to-back. A mullet setup is when you have a 29 front
Besides
wheel.
the fact that it's like a great hairstyle.
Besides the hairstyle, it is a 29 front wheel with a smaller wheel in the back. So the current common configuration is a 29 front wheel with a 27.5 rear wheel, and that kind of creates a best of both worlds. So kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none scenario, where you lose a little bit of the climbing traction, but you gain more clearance and you gain a little bit more nimbleness. So if you're looking for a little better rollover but still getting clearance, the mullet setup could be really fun. If you ride a lot of jumps, especially if they have steeper takeoffs on the jumps, the smaller rear wheel will get through steeper transitions a little easier. So those are kind of the differences. Right now I'm on a matching 29 front and rear setup, and for the majority of riding I've done so far, it's been surprisingly really good. Since I did demo a few 29ers a few years ago, and there were none that felt like this bike has, and it's something that's made me really happy with the purchase, because I was definitely looking at a few different bikes, and originally I did like the idea, but there were certainly others that I think were potentially ahead of it. But with availability and things like that, the Stump-jumper Evo is available, and I took it has all the things that I like, so I decided to take a little bit of a chance, though I definitely did my research and, feel like it's a good balance for me, and it's been pretty much everything I thought it would be, and potentially a little bit more. So really happy so far, and then, we'll see. I kind of overbuilt it a little bit, so I'll take a little bit of the weight penalty, trying to improve, durability with heavier tires and just kind of a slightly larger fork up front. So,
can we talk about suspension? Like, if you're new into biking, what's full suspension? Let's talk about suspension.
So in mountain bikes, there are three common setups. So you have a fully rigid bike, which means that your front fork and your rear triangle are all solid pieces, meaning if you go over a bump, everything is connected, so there's no way to absorb the bump. So you have to do that all yourself.
Then there's a gravel bike.
Yep, so like a gravel bike or a road bike or like a 20-inch BMX bike.
No squishies.
Those are most commonly no suspension, though these days there are some suspension BMX bikes and suspension gravel bikes creeping in. And then there is your hardtail, which would have a suspension fork on the front of the bike, but it would be a fully rigid rear end of the bike, and that is great and commonly used in cross country. If you live in a flatter area that has a lot of pedaling and you don't have a lot of technical terrain, hardtails can be nice, though there are certainly riders who will ride hardtails in really serious technical conditions, and those riders are, hats off to them. My body could not handle it, but people do it, and, kudos. And then lastly, there is full suspension, which means that you have a fork on the front that has suspension that can range from, 80 millimeters of travel to 200 millimeters of travel, and your
What
rear...
is travel?
Travel is the amount that your suspension compresses. So when you are going over a bump or off a bump, when you land, the landing force is like how much your fork compresses during that landing under load. I think I'm not a scientist or engineer by any means, so I'm not going to try to get too fancy with it. And then your rear suspension, again, can vary in travel lengths. So there can be short travel, mid, long, and they can all vary in travel lengths depending on terrain. And so you'd have a fork with suspension, and then your rear triangle would be separated between your frame and the actual chainstay and seat stay of the bike. And that allows the suspension to work and kind of allow for a smoother ride for various types of terrain. So if you're in a very technical area that's steep with a lot of rocks and roots, you might want something with a little bit more travel. And if you live in a flatter area that's a bit smoother and you're looking on, you know, maybe getting more of like the exercise aspect, not so much the adrenaline aspect, having shorter travel could be a benefit. But I'm not going to go into the weeds on that stuff because it's certainly very individual preference, location preference, style preference, and you can go way off the deep end. So I don't think I'm qualified to really go into it in that much depth without understanding somebody's wants and needs and their location, what terrain they're riding in, what the terrain conditions are like. Is it really firm? Is it super soft? Does it get really wet? Like, you can really go into the weeds. So
cool.
Try to keep it
and last but not least, what's your favorite food?
My favorite food? Well, I'm a pizza lifer, so I'll have to go with pizza.
Sweet, yeah.
I feel like you have to be able to do a classic pepperoni good. If you can do a classic pepperoni good, then we can graduate into the other stuff. But that's how, you know, a good pizza place will have a great classic pepperoni.
And a good bike shop will have a good classic bike. Out of the different bike, you know, companies, as a beginner, what companies would you suggest people look into?
There's a lot of options these days.
3 companies, go.
For a medium company, Transition. A large company, Specialized. If you're looking for a smaller company, there's some like direct-to-consumer brands that are growing. That could be pretty cool. Or there's like a company like Gorilla Gravity that makes their bikes in Colorado. They have some really cool options for a small company.
Go look for a small company?
I'm not saying they can, you know, it all depends on what they're looking for, and I don't feel like there are barriers to entry because
there isn't.
With smaller companies you often get more personalized service. But those are 3 options between small, medium, and large that somebody can go look at that offer a range of different builds and styles.
You're talking about different sizes.
Suit your needs.
Different size companies, not different size bikes, correct?
Yes, different size companies. So Specialized would be a big company that has a lot of dealers. They have a ton of different builds and price points. Arguably, probably one of the easiest bikes to source for somebody getting into the sport.
You're talking too much.
Then you have something like Transition, which is a more medium-sized company, awesome rider support, they've been great, super personable, and then smaller brands. Go have at it. You can jump into the weeds on your own.
Wow.
I'm trying to drive. You gotta do it to me because I'm trying to drive.
But yeah, so that's our bike wrap-up. That was really long, I know, I apologize, but you got all the details from Timothy Heyer. He is gonna have so much fun on his bike on this trip. Right, babe?
Disclaimer, I am no expert, so...
He's gonna talk like an expert. Anyways, I am definitely not an expert, so he does all my maintenance and whatnot, and that's really nice. But if you enjoyed this content, please feel free to like and subscribe. My name's Danny, this is Tim, and then our dogs, Aurora, Summit, and Bert. Cheers!